From Resilient Partners, this is the Resilient Insights Podcast. Every episode offers in-depth insights on the key debates and conversations shaping Washington and the world. From policy to leadership to the lighter side of life, we're your source for thoughtful discussions. So get ready to be informed, inspired, and engaged. Welcome to the Resilient Insights Podcast. I'm your guide on this journey, Joshua Baca, walking you through the intricate world of public policy, leadership, and the lighter side of life. On today's episode, I'm joined by Michigan political operative John Sellek. John is here to share his perspective on the battleground state of Michigan and explain why whoever wins Michigan in November could very well become the next president. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joshua. It's so good to see you. I love your podcast. There's a real hunger for people who want to hear calmly what's going on, think it through, not like cable news or X. I commend you for what you're doing, and hopefully I can live up to the standard that you've already set so far.
I appreciate it, John. It's been a while since we've connected. Good to see you, and congratulations on all your success in your company and all the great stuff you're doing. I follow you closely on LinkedIn and seeing all the good stuff you're doing. So just major congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's hard work and some luck. We're working in the field where we have a lot of personal interests. And I think there's that line, you never work a day in your life. I don't know if I'd quite say that. I'm definitely working, but it is doing something that I love doing and talking about. And that's why I couldn't wait to come on today and tell people about Michigan. For once, all the way till the last minute of the election, Michigan is in the mix.
Yeah. It's been a while since we worked together back in 2012 on Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. And that was literally an eternity ago, but it seems so much longer. And so much has changed in the political landscape since then. And so I want to start off with kind of a high-level discussion about the state of the race in Michigan. When you look at the 538 polling averages this morning, Vice President Harris leads Donald Trump by 1 point, essentially a toss-up race within the margin of errors. So for you, what's the current state of the race in Michigan as you see it today?
It's crazy close. I always say when I'm talking to audiences, we hear all the time the money, who has the most money, how they raise enough money. Then we hear about the polls all the time, who's winning or losing. What I usually say is time is the most valuable thing because there's hopefully an end date to this election on November 5th.
Bless our souls.
And I look at the visits where people are going, when you see how many times the four people at the top of the ticket are visiting Michigan, it's bonkers. I think it was Axios or New York Times that had a listing of all the visits. Pennsylvania clearly leads the way. They had Harris at 13 and Trump at 11, but Michigan was second for both of them, 7 for Harris and 9 for Trump. And when you add in all the Walz and Vance's visits, we just had Vice President Harris here last night down the street from me in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We've got JD Vance coming back here, going to Saginaw. The visits are nonstop. And so they're using that time to make the last minute rush here to get these votes. And in different demographic zones, we had Michelle Obama here on a college campus a few days ago in Kalamazoo, where Western Michigan University is located. Harris was at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor last night. So they're doing some tried and true stuff and some different things. Overall, when I look at scheduling, I see that Michigan is super close, or we wouldn't be continuing to see all these visits here right up to the last minute. I made a joke the other day, Joshua, you would get that in 2012, when I was the campaign manager for Mitt Romney in Michigan, we had Mitt and Ann here until August or September. Then you get on the surrogate train, and you knew once you're to mid-October and you're getting Mitt Romney's fourth cousin, that we probably weren't right on the edge of winning. No one's cousins are in Michigan right now. We've got the actual players.
Yeah. Principals are spending time there, and rightfully so. There's so much discussion around this blue wall of Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. How did Michigan become a battleground state? What are dynamics that are making this race so close today?
There's some easy explanations, big picture ones, but I think it goes back to the first statewide official I ever worked for was Governor John Engler. He went on to run a number of business groups in Washington, D.C., and he's the last 3-term governor we'll have had in Michigan before term limits. He knocked off a sitting Democrat in a state run by Democrats across the legislature, the Secretary of State's office, the Attorney General's office. It was union driven for a long time. And John Engler came in and said, we're going to cut the budget. We're going to not raise taxes. Actually, we're going to cut taxes. We're going to take people on general assistance, which was like welfare plus. You just needed a check. You didn't want a job. So boom, you got a check. Hey, that's rough, but that's how it was. He suffered through protests in the early 90s on the Capitol lawn where people were camping out saying, "Give me back my general assistance check." And lo and behold, he ran away with reelection in 1994. It was a good Republican year,
Yeah.
but he had set the tone for attracting union voters. When I first worked on his 94 campaign as an intern at Michigan State, I was the political director on his 1998 campaign, his first third term. By then, it became almost normal that John Engler was standing at a plant gate in Macomb County, outside a Chrysler plant, outside a tank plant, outside a GM plant. Didn't matter what kind of plant it is, but if there was a spinny door, John Engler was there. Early on, he was making a play for common sense conservatism to switch union voters. Back then, when George W. Bush became president in 2000, the economy was still strong, but a couple years after that, it collapsed. Manufacturing was moving out. Union members were here, but they didn't have jobs. That was incredibly frustrating. I think that continued to where Trump has the common touch talking to these people. It drives Democrats, members of the media bonkers. They can't get it. Intellectually, they're like, he's rich and out of touch, and they are working class. How could this be happening? Kamala Harris is running ads in Michigan every minute saying, "I'm middle class and he's rich and out of touch." They know who Trump is at this point.
Yep.
And that's his magic, right?
Yep.
That's his magic in making that kind of connection. He made it okay for them to be pissed off that their jobs got taken. He wasn't going to say, "I'm okay with a free trade internationalist economy," but it didn't make a main point to engage and blow up their leadership. Trump is at the point where it's like, UAW leader, I'm going to fight you and explain to your members that you don't represent them.
Yeah.
I just saw Senator John Fetterman talking about the steel mill in his town and the union leader, and everybody driving out had truck nuts, and he was having to explain what truck nuts were to the New
Yes.
York Times. People in the union started switching to being conservatives because Trump told them it was okay to be themselves, not to say, "Take my job and go back to college." So that is a huge part of the change here in Michigan. We can talk about some of the counties that'll stick out that way, but they're the counties where industrial manufacturing places were, and they're either no longer there or it's a much changed atmosphere.
Who has momentum on the ground?
It's interesting because the feeling people have matches up with a lot of the polls that we see, that everything is so close, that you see both campaigns pulling on every thread. Can I get a couple loose voters over here? Can I get a couple loose voters over there? Because there are almost no undecided voters left. A really well respected political science professor at Michigan State pointed out some data the other day that showed that voters who had identified as undecided this late in October in the last two presidentials didn't really vote. Only a quarter, 25% out of like what we have 2% right now. So a half percent might show up. Now, can that in this close of an election make a difference? Sure,
Yeah.
it can, but you see a lot of the campaigning is about, can I persuade some folks? So you see the Trump team going into Detroit and other places, asking Black and Hispanic male voters, "What have Democrats done for you? Nothing. Come over and vote for me. Let's see how that goes." Michigan has a unique place where, like, we're hearing about Puerto Rico and Pennsylvania. Well, Michigan, centered in the Dearborn community, but in the area around it as well, into Detroit to one side, and Dearborn Heights and other places to the west, has arguably the largest Arab American population
Yep.
in the country. The fight started under Biden about, the undecided beat him in Dearborn, and that has continued on for Harris. We saw Trump was back in suburban Detroit, Novi, the other day, and he had leaders of multiple Muslim-led cities that were up there with him saying that they were going to endorse him. So that's another thread the Trump campaign is trying to pull on to see if they can convince some of those folks to come along. So the coalitions are going to be fascinating once we see the exit polling.
Yeah. What are the issues dominating the debate today? There's a lot of talk about the economy and immigration, even energy policy. You mentioned a little bit about the economic condition driving issues in Michigan. What are the top issues voters care about right now?
Energy policy is important, but not like in Pennsylvania. We have an oil and gas industry, but it's not anywhere near, I think, what takes place in Pennsylvania. So we hear less about it, but more on prices.
Mm.
I do PR for a living. I talk to reporters every day. Some of them will see a headline that says the rate of inflation has declined year over year. Yay, everybody should be happy. You're like, no, the prices remained at the higher level they are at now compared to before the pandemic. And people are feeling that. Their wages didn't necessarily go up to match that. We see that with interest rates on mortgages and cars.
Yep.
All those financial issues still exist here. But probably the issue that has had the most money spent on it is the electric vehicle, the idea of electric vehicle mandates,
Oh, yeah.
the idea of even electric vehicle manufacturing requiring a lot less jobs, like some estimates up to 40% fewer jobs than assembling a gasoline powered car. because that just requires less parts. And are they going to get made here? Democrats in control in Michigan, starting with Governor Whitmer, she's like looking ahead and saying, well, gosh, if all cars are eventually going to be electric, we should try to be making them here. The messiness in the American auto manufacturers not having the technology to build the batteries right now on their own and having to bring in partners like Chinese owned companies
Yeah.
coming into Michigan to build battery factories has provided some fertile ground for Republicans. So we hear from Trump every time he's here that the auto industry is going to go away if he is not the president. He's saying that the head of the UAW doesn't know what he's doing and these auto workers should come with him. And then where you see it, Joshua, is the US Senate race at $200 million total spending for Michigan. That's the biggest ever been done at any level. It's wall to wall. And the issue where Mike Rogers really started to get some traction was about a massive battery factory funded in part with state tax dollars, owned by a Chinese company connected to the Chinese Communist Party. That's just become a huge factor. That plant individually, how the plant got there, whether there were NDAs signed by state and federal officials in Michigan as they recruited those kind of mega sites that we call them here. Michigan felt that it was falling behind on these like ready-made mega sites to bring in these huge factories. Some people afraid that they will turn into the Foxconn of Michigan, but they are popping up and there's a lot of competition for these places. Plus, if you have this idea that we're going to build electric vehicles here, we need to build batteries here too. So a lot of fighting and arguing going around it. And that is what most of the messaging is right now, going back and forth, whether Mike Rogers was a lobbyist for China or his companies were, and whether Elissa Slotkin signed NDAs that protected information that allowed Chinese companies to come in and get massive tax breaks, lay people off, and own property. The federal government found Chinese nationals at the University of Michigan trying to observe or spy on a National Guard base in northern Michigan. So the hysteria around that issue is massive, and literally hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent on it.
You hear a lot about the EV mandate in DC, but it comes across as noise. It's interesting to hear you say it's actually having an impact.
Mike Rogers, who's in Congress for a long time, from the same seat Elissa Slotkin holds right now. And if you add up all the votes they've taken, they've got a lot of record to go on, a lot of things to criticize. The only thing she's basically attacking Rogers on abortion, which is, reproductive rights as we see everywhere else,
Yep.
based on his votes and comments in the past. She also tried to tie in some companies he worked for after Congress to Chinese firms. She was first out of the box on that because I think she knew she would be attacked. And then she sells her national security credentials because she worked for the federal government, the Department of Defense, and CIA when she was working for President Obama and George W. Bush. So she shows ads with both saying she's bipartisan, like most Democrats do right now. And then Mike Rogers, head of the Intelligence Committee for years in Congress, and he was attacking Slotkin because of these manufacturing facilities. A lot of public officials in Michigan, Joshua, wanted to be on the inside of the recruitment of these mega sites to come. And some of them are Chinese battery factories, some are from other countries. Microchip factories are rumored to be coming to Flint area. And to do those things, those companies are requiring NDAs, and Republicans and Democrats have signed them at the state level. Slotkin and her staff have signed varying degrees of NDAs on these things. They'll make claims whether they're about the Chinese battery factory or not, but nonetheless, that's what the fight became over. It helped boost Rogers up inside the Republican base because he had not been in office for a long time.
Yeah.
And both Slotkin and Rogers representing this mid-Michigan Lansing base seat, it's the worst congressional seat media market wise to run statewide. They both needed to introduce themselves statewide because nobody would have known who they were. This is how they're getting introduced to the rest of the state. This is what you see on the ads round the clock.
You talk a lot about the Senate race. There's a Senate race in Michigan between Representative Elissa Slotkin and former Representative Mike Rogers. What's the state of that race? Who has momentum overall? You talk a little bit about the issues defining the race, but who's tracking right now? I think this morning the 538 polling average had Slotkin up approximately 4 points. So who has momentum on the ground now?
I think Rogers is picking up ground. And that's important for him, not only just because it's the end of the election, it's how the front of the election started. And I'll try to hit it quick. Senator Debbie Stabenow has been in office for a long time, 25 years basically. And she's been pretty good at her job. She's gotten elected most times. She had a surprisingly close re-election against John James, which helped his race toward being in Congress right now and a rising star for Republicans, maybe a gubernatorial candidate down the road here. But, she's only 72. And we joke that that's like a full generation younger than most current US senators. She's like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go enjoy my life.
Yeah.
But the thing that she did was make sure that she cleared the field for Slotkin. Democrats control so many offices, and open Senate seats don't come around often. There could have been a messy primary. Democrats hold every big position, but there's a lot of term limits at the state level. So any number of people could have ran for the seat, but stabbing on the Dem clearly went out of the way to try to clear the field. She had token opposition, essentially. She ran over the actor Hill Harper. She did lose the city of Detroit 60-40 to Harper. That's where he's from. He's African American. That was, a red flag and probably helped her improve her campaign as she was going in a way she wouldn't have otherwise done. But she was ready and raising money. She's amazing at is raising money. Slotkin's very good at that. So Slotkin was able to go on the air and start introducing herself before Mike Rogers. She's held that advantage almost the entire time. She's always had a polling lead. There's been some polls that showed it close, but the longer Slotkin was on the air, sort of like unanswered, introducing herself because of her cash advantage and time advantage, the more she had a small lead in these polls. Rogers had a go contested primary. He made it through. He was the best candidate in the primary for the general, no doubt. I think folks in Washington knew that. Folks in Michigan knew that. But fundraising's been a challenge. He raised about 10 million overall. Slack announced she's raised almost 43 million. But now that like Senate Leadership Fund and every, super brother and sister and Tom, Dick, and Harry, yeah, they're spending parity on the air. The place for Rogers to pick up space is with Trump voters. There is a swath of Trump voters who are in the Slotkin category right now because she portrayed herself as middle of the road, national security, all that good stuff. They just didn't know about Mike Rogers yet. And so coming down the final stretch here is Rogers' task to pull some of those Trump voters back. If Trump does well in Michigan, clearly it's going to really help Rogers toward the end. But Slotkin's had that advantage pretty much all along.
So you're basically saying for Rogers to win, Trump's going to have to drag him across the finish line.
I'm not going to say anything mean, but yes, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful. But it looks like, Mitch McConnell and everyone else is doing their best to assist in that process because the millions are on the air right now attacking Slotkin and still trying to boost Mike Rogers so people understand who he is. He's a fantastic general election candidate. He's the kind of Republican that Republicans need right now. And in part it's because he's old school from the past of the retail, not the bomb throwing GOP right now. So he's just got to catch up on that front. The Detroit News polling that was out this morning over the last 2 days, they leaked out race by race. They had Harris up by 3, but within the margin of error. A lot of people remember 2016 really well, that there was a ton of low propensity, non-college, especially male voters that Trump pulled in that don't answer the phone. They don't spend a half an hour talking to pollsters. They just don't do that. And they're not caught in those polls. I think that's what keeps Democrats up at night, including Slotkin.
Yeah. Slotkin is polling slightly better than Kamala Harris in Michigan. Does Slotkin have an effect where she brings headline, or is it really the top of the ticket what matters?
The top of the ticket matters. Trump has been on the ballot now 3 times in a row. He won Michigan once before. He only lost by a small margin, 3%. The second time, he is still the draw. The election is about him and his ability to turn people out. I do think, though, for Harris's purposes, having somebody like Slotkin at the top makes it better for her. I think there's little doubt about that. She's not any kind of drag or negative. She's the opposite because most of the messaging that Harris has on the air, Josh, was, I'm middle class, I'm kind, I'll think about you. And he doesn't. And Slotkin is that messaging wise in spades.
Gotcha. You mentioned earlier Dearborn, Michigan. There's noise in D.C. around the Arab American and Muslim American vote in Michigan. Some voters may protest against Vice President Harris and vote for third party. Is that real? What's your perspective?
We have third party candidates on the ballot, and we are seeing 3 or 4% going to RFK still.
Wow.
Even though he's fought his way all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court to get his name off the ballot. That's a real controversy here because the Secretary of State, Democrat Jocelyn Benson, insisted on keeping his name on. Some of the judges who've written their opinions and said, there's little doubt this is going to have an effect on the outcome of the election. Jill Stein is there again. She caused a recount for us before and helped Trump in 2016. She's making her play on the Middle East issue right now, whether she's the kind of person that can draw enough votes on that front. The question is whether they vote at all.
Yeah.
A lot of organized groups, political groups in that circle of voters is asking people not to vote at all. They're saying don't support either one of them. And so that's obviously a negative for Harris. President Trump has managed to get some support. It's important to remember, just like any demographic, there are different layers. The Muslim and Arab community in Michigan is not monolithic. It's not all from the same country. It's not all of the same religion. It's a mix. We see a mayor of Hamtramck, formerly a bastion of Polish immigration that powered the auto factories across the city of Detroit. Now it has a fully Muslim city council and a mayor. He has been out front endorsing Donald Trump, and he's appeared at all his events. The city of Dearborn Heights, the mayor, Bill Bozzi, he's come out and endorsed Donald Trump. But the epicenter, the main city, the biggest population of those voters is in Dearborn, Michigan. That mayor was a former Democratic state legislator, and he is walking the line, but he's a Democrat. There is a split. It's a true unknown what will happen if we're in a super close election and 20,000 people who don't vote or 30,000 people who don't vote. It's going to have an impact
Yeah.
if it is as close as we thought. Now, Biden won by about 140,000 votes last time, so she could withstand that kind of a hit, but that would imply that there's no other hits too compared to what Biden had in 2020.
One of the things I learned in politics, and too, is the importance of coalitions. And in some ways, that has kind of been thrown out the window in this campaign. So much of the demographic data you see is really kind of boiling down to men versus women on who they vote for. Are there any other coalitions in Michigan that could impact the race today?
African American and Hispanic male voters are definitely votes Trump is trying to garner. If we go back to March of this year, President Biden was struggling. A lot of Democrats in Michigan were really grumpy that they didn't feel like they had personal connections with the Biden White House. They weren't getting what they wanted. President Biden was close with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, but for some other African American elected officials around Southeast Michigan, they weren't happy with what they were getting. And so Detroit is located in Wayne County, obviously super Democrat area. It has an executive, kind of like a mayor. That's Warren Evans, experienced politician, former sheriff, African American Democrat. He wrote in March saying, President Biden, you're going to fail here. I have nothing to sell. Please help me. Give me something to sell the African American male voters. This is not going well. And that's all the way back in March. He publicly was like asking for that help. And he's not somebody that usually is doing that kind of thing. That was a huge red flag to me that he was willing to go public and do that. Trump did marginally better in Detroit than other Republicans, but not a ton. I don't know that we'll see the same kind of movement in national polls.
Yeah.
There's also, with African American voters, a sizable Hispanic population in Southwest Detroit. And so that's another zone where we're hearing a lot of efforts on the Trump team to try to pull those voters over. In the national polling, I was reading the New York Times Siena poll, and Nate Cohn went through their last set of battleground polls. And they're like, what's in here? Why is it that we are seeing Harris recover a lot of what Biden lost, but not all?
Not all.
And what's the bigger trends? They looked at the issues. They asked, should there be a border wall? Should we deport illegal immigrants? Is crime out of control in cities? Are we spending too much money on foreign wars as opposed to spending more in our cities? At least 40% of both Black and Hispanic male respondents said yes.
Wow.
On spending too much money in other countries compared to our own towns, it was over 50% for both. Clearly, Trump has an
Messaging
impact on those
resonated. Yeah.
issues. Democrats, they don't want to see it, or they hate him so bad they can't bear to look at the numbers.
Yeah.
But there was proof right there that some of what he's talking about matters, particularly in the messaging. When Trump attacked Detroit, there's a lot of pride about its recovery and movement forward. It's far from done, but massively improved. He's saying, what have Democrats done for you? What do you have to lose? Come and vote for me. Those numbers in the New York Times poll show he's got some room to move.
Yeah. Gretchen Whitmer has been categorized as a candidate for higher office. She was rumored to replace Biden when they were talking about replacing Biden on the ticket and maybe a
Right.
VP candidate. And she took her name out. Does she have the political infrastructure to pull Harris and Slotkin over the finish line?
I think that's possible. First, the Dem state party is well regarded, and it's easier to have a strong state political party when you have the governor in office that will help you raise money, that allows you to raise money. The Republicans did not have that. They had a chair from the rebellious MAGA wing who knew nothing about running a party, Christina Caramo. She gave away the office, lost control, and was dragged out of the last convention. They had to replace her, which was unprecedented midterm, with former ambassador to the Netherlands and Congressman Pete Hoekstra,
Yeah.
who's done an admirable job trying to like straighten things out. But it put the GOP way behind what the Democrats have done. So the Democratic Party Chair Lavora Barnes, excellent at what she does. Governor Whitmer is a political animal. She understands politics and loves and thrives on being in public. So she's nothing but a boost for their party. As far as like just having a massive infrastructure, she's got a lot of support. She certainly has a lot of support among women. She used the reproductive rights issue to its highest degree. I feel like she was the example setter for the rest of the country in 2022. She did not hesitate to run on that issue. She also is like, she's moved into a different space, Joshua, where it would be hard to believe she doesn't want to be a candidate for national office. She may just want to maneuver into some kind of media role or maybe running a national organization like Planned Parenthood or something along those lines. She's invested a lot of energy and time on her state staff by hiring a crew of what are really good social media people, constantly pushing the envelope of putting her on these trends of what are the memes of the day. Now she hit a roadblock. If you want to search the Whitmer Doritos video
Oh,
online,
yeah.
you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yep. Yeah.
Not good. Live by the sword, die by the sword. They won awards, ended up in the New York Times when the Barbie movie came out. They knew how to play along. I'm the same age as Governor Whitmer. My kids were like, you are not cool. There's a limit for her. There's a danger in how she
Oh,
can play to the kids, but that's who she's playing to. This election is about men right now. When Vice President Harris was here, Governor Whitmer took her to the bar and they were sitting at a famous microbrewery in Michigan called Bell's Brewery in Kalamazoo. They forgot they're on camera. Harris is saying, we need help with men. Whitmer's strength overall
and
is
women.
with women.
Yeah.
And then her whole social media thing is toward younger voters.
Yeah.
So that's a long winded answer to your question. I'd rather have her if I'm the Democrats, but she also needs Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan and the infrastructure of politics in Detroit. And so it'll be interesting to see like how much recovery Harris achieved there, getting people to be motivated to help her as they were with their frustration level over Joe Biden.
Yeah. It's election night and we're watching all the results come in. What are the counties we got to keep an eye on who wins this election and how that's going to play out?
Well, it's funny you should ask, Joshua. I've got my notes right here. I was looking at this and it's pretty interesting overall. Michigan's been a swing state. We've been a purple state, but this is the first time, I joked we're a swing state right to the very end. We're almost always a swing state until we get to like September or October.
Yeah.
Clearly, we are. And the counties that have done a lot of shifting primarily are counties that were former Democrat union bastions where jobs have gone away, or if they came back, they're not what they were. When I look at where those trends and visits are happening, Saginaw County, part of what we call the Tri-County area up here by Saginaw Bay. You've got Flint, Saginaw, and Bay counties and Bay City. Um, those are the areas where Bay County has already gone Republican. In 2012, Barack Obama got 53%. By 2016, Trump got 53%. And
Wow.
last time in 2020, Trump got 55. There's now a state representative who's a Republican in that House seat for the first time since Ronald Reagan. That conversion already happened. Genesee County, where Flint is more stubborn for the Republicans. The Democrats have hung on to it, but the more rural suburban area went to a Republican state house again for the first time since Ronald Reagan was on the ticket. Saginaw County, another former GM auto industry origination zone, a really tough town. It's been on hard times for a long time. That county has gone from 56% Barack Obama in 2012 to Trump winning with 48% in 2016 and Biden winning by zero 0.3 in
Wow.
2020. We've had 2 visits from Trump, a visit from Vance, a second visit from Vance coming up. Harris has been there a couple times, Walz has been there, and Biden visited before he got out of the race. Saginaw County is a place that we're going to be watching really close, a similar place. Muskegon County, Barack Obama won with 58% in 2012. Hillary Clinton only won by a point with 47% in 2016. Biden won by less than 1% in 2020. It's another former industrial blue collar area that's changing. One other zone stretches the entire state across the bottom, the I-94 corridor from Chicago to Detroit. If you drew a box around that, places that have state house battles going on at the same time that Trump and Harris are battling for these men, former union blue collar workers, lower education levels. Battle Creek, Jackson, you got to skip over Ann Arbor because that's just like another entire planet.
Yep.
And then into the downriver area where Trump could be carrying Republicans to a majority in the state house.
Wow.
Those zones across there, Wayne County, Jackson County, Calhoun County, we're going to be watching all those places where some of those seats have Democrats state house level, some have Republicans, all being fought over to the tunes of millions of dollars. Those are places Trump started pushing toward Republicans. Conversely, a few counties that used to be strong Mitt Romney places, even in northern Michigan, that are changing. And, Traverse City,
Yep.
Leelanau County, and Grand Traverse County. Biden, for the first time for a Democrat in forever, won Leelanau County because its demographics are becoming wealthier, retirement homes, second homes, remote workers. Traverse City itself, the city on the Grand Traverse Bay, is bright blue now and has a very progressive member of the state house who's locked in a tough reelection battle, but the rest of the county is still red. Grand Traverse County, Mitt Romney won with 55% in 2012, and Trump won by 50.6
Wow.
in 2020. So it's trending away from us, but it's still a battleground.
Great insight, John. Thank you so much for that. Let's put a wrap on this and kind of switch to something a little bit more fun. One of the things that we do on the Resilient Insights podcast is we ask people to help us curate a playlist, songs that capture the mood of the day or the political environment that we're living in, or whatever that may be. So what's your song today that captures the current mood of Michigan?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I would expose my age if I said Under Pressure by David Bowie and Queen. That one would fit right now, but we'd probably have to pick a Taylor Swift song and maybe a Babytron song, Detroit's own rapper. My kids of his songs playing all the time. I'll pick one and text it to you.
And you got Eminem on one side, Kid Rock on the other.
Not at all.
You've got it all happening
we got
in Michigan.
the Eminem part is tricky because everybody knows where Kid Rock stands. He hasn't had anything new lately. I think it surprised some people that Eminem was on stage with President Obama. I don't have any problem saying President Obama in a rally situation with his own people, he is just so good at that stuff. And he managed to start rapping Lose Yourself by Eminem up on the stage. He had the crowd going nuts. So sometimes it's interesting to admire a politician who's positive and entertaining without going negative. And he did it with Eminem up there. That probably caused some Republicans consternation. We take pride in Eminem. We love Eminem, Detroit Lions, and how they're kicking butt. Eminem's visiting camp and playing along. He entered the political game a little more directly, like Kid Rock. We make a lot of music in Michigan, so you still have your option no matter which side you're on.
Make a plug for yourself, John. Where can people find you?
Thank you. We do public relations and public affairs for almost every kind of topic. We're bipartisan. We do a lot of pro-business stuff. I grew up in the Republican side of the world, but it's a private business world now, Joshua. We work with everybody that needs help. So you can see us at Harbor Strategic Public Affairs. Our website is harborstrategic.com.
That's great. John, I appreciate you so much for being a guest on the podcast. Listeners, give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. This podcast is available on all streaming platforms, including YouTube. Until next time, keep listening.
Later.
Thanks, John.
And I just can't see